Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining. You've landed today in what's been a continuation of a partnership that we kicked off at the RSA conference this year with some of the most forward-thinking leaders in the detection and response space. If you were at our RSA Anvilogic and Databricks party, you definitely felt the energy there. But today we are channeling it into more of what it all actually means and talking about how SAP, Anvilogic, and Databricks are future-proofing detection, not by chasing the next SIEM, but by building a very flexible, very AI-native model that fits a lot of the complexity of today. So, lot to unpack here, but first and foremost, let's meet the people that are building the new frontier of what this is. We have Roland Kostea, CISO at SAP, based out of Germany. We have Alan Masinkiewicz, solution architect at Databricks, very close to the deployment of the Anvilogic and Databricks deployment there, and also calling in from Germany. And Mackenzie Kyle, VP of Product here at Anvilogic, calling in from New Jersey. So, gentlemen, thank you guys so much for joining. Before we dive into detections and lake houses, how are you guys doing? Your travels have been smooth. Tell us a little bit about what you guys have been up to.
I think we're waiting for the holiday season. So there are a lot of events happening in Q2. Different big events, May, June are quite busy, but it's going well and a lot of new stuff coming in, a lot of new announcements. May is a month of announcements, so it's going well. Thanks, Alex.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm actually traveling to San Francisco next week to our Data and AI Summit that I'm looking forward to. And there also will be SAP speaking about cybersecurity. We will talk about cybersecurity. Alex, you will be there in McKinsey. So looking forward to meeting you in person.
Yeah, we're headed back to the Bay after RSA. I think Mac's been there in the last 3 times in the last month.
Yeah. Been out there a lot. It's like conference season right now, right? So I think it's just a lot of travel, but looking forward to seeing you and the team, Alan, at the Databricks conference next week.
Yeah, and reflecting the last time I was just at RSA, it was like a garage sale of agents and agentic AI walking through that show floor. I know you guys saw that. But because of all that, it makes this discussion all that more timely, right? When it comes to this deployment in particular, you guys were an early adopter of the Anvilogic and Databricks solution. We're applying AI in the most important function, right, of SecOps and detection engineering. So through some Q&A and an open discussion, I want to walk through how you three really work together your tech stacks to build something that I think our listeners are going to really want to hear about. So are you guys ready to kind of get started?
Yeah, let's go first.
All right. By way of an agenda here, you can expect sort of the following overview. And then also this was really optimized for our replay listeners if you want to jump to a certain segment. If we zoom out for a second and start with the bigger picture, right? We're in what I've been calling like a detection engineering renaissance, right? Where the old models of this centralized detection are really being broken down and something new is taking form. And Roland, you've been really at the center of that shift as an early adopter of the Anvilogic and Databricks approach. You've helped push forward a model that's gaining a lot of traction in the market, that's super modular, that's data first. And it's one that not everyone saw coming, right? Not everyone shares this vision. So I really want to start there because you did, right? You didn't follow this playbook of centralizing everything into the next SIEM, right? You took a different path. So what pushed you to break away from that centralized SIEM model at SAP?
So we have, I would say, the main challenge that we start with is the amount of data we process. We are in the third consecutive year where we have extreme growth. And that's a good thing for the business, but that comes with a lot of new systems, a lot of new data. In average, an organization, I think, processes 28 to 30%, maybe max, new data year over year. We go over 100 in the third consecutive year. So this is a huge amount of data that we need to look into actually having the right visibility end to end to be able to have the right detections. Then we are looking at the time we spent to build correlation rules and logic in our SIEM and how efficient we were in that process. And then, of course, it's cost. It's costly to send data to one destination because the data is different. We need different sorts of data for different reasons. We need to store some data for longer period of times. We need to store other types of data for less or for shorter period of time. So then we need to look into the way we keep it. And I would say the main word for everything is speed. I love speed. I'm obsessed about speed, and that's what we need in security to have the right speed. So this was the main challenge. On top of that, there was an ask from our customers. Cloud, by definition, is a bit of I would not call it a black box, but it's somehow you lose control and you lose visibility. So how can we get back to we operate the biggest private cloud in the world today, more than 200,000 VMs spanned on all hyperscalers operated by SAP. How can we give back a bit of the visibility and the transparency to our customers that actually move core business systems to SAP private cloud by at least starting with sharing logs with direct real-time APIs, and that cannot happen by directly integrating with the SIEM. It needs a different model. So you need to go back as close to the source, look into all the data sets, make sure that you take only what's really needed, put it in the right place for the right period of time, and apply a logic on top of it that actually brings you speed in the overall security. So that's in a nutshell.
So data availability and cost, it resonates with a lot of, as well as what we've been seeing amongst our customers. Our state of detection engineering report revealed that 54% of organizations don't even have the data that they need, right? It often doesn't make it there, even the most critical of sources, and it gets left behind. So why, but at the same time, like, why do you think that is it even realistic to centralize detection at that scale, or is it just like this comforting illusion?
I think they invested a lot of time and money in the past that actually makes them a bit uncomfortable to do change. It's all about change. And if you think about big organizations, including SAP, we are slow by definition. We are slow. So if you want to keep the trend, I mean, for me, it's my mission to actually be fast or try to find ways to be fast and gain speed in an organization that is by definition slow. That is not easy. It comes with a lot of changes. It comes with a lot of changes, not necessarily on the security team, but also on different operational teams. Security is not an independent function. It works well with IT, it works well with cloud ops, with business, etc. So it needs a lot of collaboration and making them aware that they can also gain efficiencies from this move. So it's not a one game. I think there are multiple games out there. But what I can tell is that it worth the effort. So there are a lot of gains, both on cost, which may be interesting for somebody, both on the velocity, so speed overall, but also on the visibility, by itself. Plus, you get real control about the data. You are having the correct data sets when you want them and store them for the right period of time based on your regulatory requirements or whatever specific standards or best practices you may have.
Yes, thanks for sharing. So cost being the most inhibiting factor of these traditional monolithic models, and speed, of course. They inhibit you from moving at the velocity that your business needs, because as a global service provider, you're constantly moving, you're constantly growing, you're constantly changing, no matter where you want to go, right? And that obviously aligns a lot to data growth. So Mac, I want to spotlight you for a moment. We're in this weird in-between era, like where we have like some 3-4 big SIEM players in the market, right? Which you can just go to the next SIEM even, but no new SIEMs are coming out of stealth, right? If you look at the startup landscape. In the SIEM market, there's, like I said, there's these 3 to 4 players, maybe through acquisition, they've formalized into an NG SIEM, or maybe some two just merged themselves. And yet we're still watching kind of this silent failure unfold of organizations that are just jumping from SIEM to SIEM, thinking that this time it's going to be different. Like this next one is going to be it, right? Why do you think that cycle is so persistent? And how are you, representing Anvilogic, helping CISOs like Roland cut it off at the root?
Sure. So I think Roland nailed it. I think it's just it's change, right? I think it's people um, not fully grasping, right, some of these newer technologies, especially that aren't traditionally, talked about as being a SIM solution, right? So from a Databricks perspective, right, you don't necessarily think about Databricks as of right now as, oh, that could be my SIM. I think from the security landscape and just growing up in security a long time, you started with ArcSight, you go to Splunk, right? You go to the next SIM and you replace those every 2 to 3 years because of the common themes, right? You outgrow it, you need to add more data, it's becoming too costly, it's hard to maintain,
Living in
the
the
scale isn't there.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's like the common problem over and over and over. And I just think it comes down to the Sims have done a really good job of building proprietary languages that keep people sticky, right? So like if you're using Splunk like I have for almost 15 years now, you're really good at SPL, right? You're really good at all these languages. You've built a lot of content. You've built a lot of capabilities in those systems for a number of years. It does take, right, some thought and effort to kind of to switch over to something that's different. But there are so many downstream benefits of that kind of transition that I think those will eventually, as those come to light, as people start to become more comfortable with those, that will start to far outweigh, right, the just every 2 years switch to a SIM, at least from my perspective.
I love that. I gotta ask too, and why Databricks? Like, why going with someone like Databricks was so compelling for this new direction that SAP took with their business model?
So, I mean, we were looking to have a main data lake. So we operate on all the main 3 hyperscalers today. So we have a lot of smaller data lakes placed in the air, but we are looking to have one big data lake that actually is the main data lake or unified data lake for all the data sets that we have, irrespective of the case. And that's probably the number one. Yeah, unified data lakehouse. And we are looking at the architecture. It needs to be scalable. So how actually that scalability combines with the performance and the reliability of the data lakehouse as a product. It needs to have performance and speed for security telemetry. That's really an important thing because that enables quick detection and alerting and querying the data in the backend. It needs to have centralized data governance. It needs to have access control. We should be able to audit across all our data assets and apply what we try to call fine-grained access control, so that analysts only access data relevant to their role, but also if we want to do that for a specific customer or a specific area or region, so that we have the right separation. And of course, it needs to support machine learning and AI, and that's what we are here. And the partnership with Anvilogic and Databricks actually made that possible to actually fill in the circle.
Of course. And Databricks, being a data and AI company, Alan, I'm sure you have a take on this. What resonates you the most, since you have such close intimacy with the deployment you've architected here for SAP? What's your take from that side of the data world, and how is Databricks different from this traditional SIM model that makes it better, that makes it more have the velocity that Roland is looking for?
Yeah, yeah, good question. So, I mean, what Roland says, it already hits the nail quite well. I think one thing to understand about Databricks in the beginning is that it is not a SIM, right? It's not a traditional SIM. It's not even, I would say, a cybersecurity specific solution. So it's a general cloud native data platform, and customers do all sorts of things with Databricks today. So we have many car manufacturers who are streaming their IoT data into Databricks, right, at high velocity. We have retailers who build their own AI to identify how many cars are parking at their competitors' retail stores to kind of infer how well they're doing. We have a lot of business data, right, that is being combined together with, for instance, non-business data like logs and streams. But we also have obviously cybersecurity use cases. And I think what we see from this other traditional data domain, like data warehouses, data lakes, a lot of customers are now moving from their existing data platforms on-premise into the cloud. And they can also stay with their existing vendor, right? Like a Teradata, for instance. Or they can adopt a cloud native model, right? Which is fundamentally different than the on-premise model in the way it handles storage and compute, right? In the cloud native model, you actually separate storage and compute. You put the data in the object store and you have another cluster querying the data every time. So that makes it much more scalable and much more cost effective. And at the same time, you can scale as you need. You don't need to have this fixed capacity, like for instance, with a on-premise data warehouse. And these on-premise solutions, when they have cloud solutions as well, these usually do not have this cloud native separation. They still couple storage and compute. And this is true for like a traditional data warehouse, and this is true for a traditional SIEM. And that makes it so different, right? That you have this separation of storage and compute that allows for this scalability in the cloud and really utilizes the cloud in the right way, in a cost-effective way. And especially in the security domain where data is growing, this really becomes a huge point why there are customers who choose Databricks for their cybersecurity, even though it might not even have certain features that you would want to have in a SIEM or in a cybersecurity use case out of the box easily, right?
And so it's not just a tactical upgrade. It's more scalable. It scales with you no matter where you want to grow, how much data you want to ingest, while keeping the cost low, unlike a traditional monolithic SIEM model where storage, compute, and the analytics all happen in under this one, monolithic unit. So I love that. Now, where I gotta follow up, where does Anvilogic come into the picture?
Yeah, you're completely right. It's a strategic thing, right? You're buying into a new way of how software works in the cloud, right? So, and that is something that kind of Databricks offers. That's the innovation. That's the innovation that the traditional data world is using, and that now also is being adopted in the cybersecurity world. Now, the thing that Databricks, I would say, lacks is it is not a cybersecurity specific solution, right? So you would need to have a lot of expertise in Spark. You would need a lot of data engineers. You would need to know what type of detections do you want, what type of data sources you need. You also have an interface that's more tailored towards engineers. And the beauty here with Anvilogic is that Anvilogic uses Databricks underneath as this backend, as this engine, but it provides a front end that is much more familiar to cybersecurity analysts. It contains business logic that is relevant to cyber. No? Like it tells you, you need this data feed, you need these detections. Here's an easy way of tuning that. And this accelerates the adoption like much more, right? So you don't need that much expertise out of the box in Databricks. You can deploy detections much faster. And this is also a thing that maybe Roland, you can talk a bit about is you can actually adopt Anvilogic on your existing SIEM, build detections in Anvilogic, and then gradually move over the data feeds to Databricks, right? So, which makes it more smoother.
Before we get into explaining the solution, I do want to hear everyone's version of the solution in their own words. But so we've covered segment one, right? We've laid out the problem where the traditional SIEM model, right, isn't keeping up. It's not fast enough. It's and ripping and replacing. hasn't really solved the real issue, which I keep hearing is like the quality of the detection. It's not made for engineers. It doesn't have the content, right, that moves at the speed of change, or even the data availability. Because the better you want to get with threat detection, the more it seems to cost. And where cloud native models doesn't have to be that way. You guys have solved the cost side of the problem, right? So now moving on to segment 2, this solution. I've heard so many. I love hearing how other people describe the Anvilogic solution. So, Roland, starting with you, then Alan, then Mac. Can you describe the Anvilogic solution in your own words? And you can't say what he said.
That's good. So in my own words, Anvilogic helps us by providing the intelligence layer we need from cybersecurity perspective, that it's aligned with the framework we use, which is meter attack framework, on top of huge amount of data sets. And practically, it tells us exactly what types of data sets we need in order to build the right detections at scale versus the framework that we are using. Gives us the compliancy versus how good we are into the deployment of those detections, allows us to fastly fine-tune and threat hunt through the same data sets that we have, and overall gives us some KPIs into how good we are versus how good we are in a more manual fashion that we had in the past, that we are actually building it one by one, let's say. So maybe too many words, not necessarily 2-3 sentences, but yeah, that's what it is for us.
Oh, I love it.
Who's next?
What's next?
What Roland said, right? So
You can't say what he
You
said.
can't say it, I was the first one, so I was the lucky one.
Yeah, so to me, it's like exactly that point, right? So Anvilogic really provides it's a cybersecurity specific solution, right? It's like something for detection engineering, and it's made for security analysts, and it tells you much more things that you would otherwise need to know yourself as an engineer, that you would need to design like that, right? Like what data feed do you need, right? Like what detection should you deploy? Have you deployed every critical detection on your data feed? That's things that are very specific to cybersecurity and are very relevant, and also users are familiar with that, right? And it leverages another data platform underneath for the compute, right? So the actual data, the physical data, lives either in Databricks or also in another SIEM, or another data platform.
I love it. And Mac, maybe you have the hardest one.
So I think from our perspective, we 5.5 years ago, we started this journey where we wanted to create a blueprint for primary SOC workflows that we feel are extremely important in security operations, right? And that's data onboarding, detection engineering, and triage, right? And how do you do it in a way that alleviates the requirements of forcing people into one proprietary SIEM solution, right? How do you do it in a way that allows you to pick and choose more flexible options where it makes sense, but also continue to leverage your existing tooling and capabilities that maybe you've spent 5 to 6 years already developing, right? So when I think of Anvilogic, I just think of a blueprint to do this in a way that's not forcing you to use a certain set of technologies, and just being able to streamline, right, detection engineering and response, right, across some of these different data platforms. That's really going to allow you to scale in the future, right, and scale in a way that I think is more for the machine learning AI generation of analytic use cases that people are going to start, having to build. So that's what we've been working on, and that's what we've been building, and definitely excited to be working with SAP and Databricks on this, because really good solutions come from working closely with your customers on the problems and where they're going, right? So Roland's strategy and what he just described really drives, right, a lot of the the vision for us. And then of course Databricks, Alan and team there and Databricks working with us, making sure that we're building it per their best practices and doing it in a way that scales. It's been a really awesome collaboration.
Well, that was definitely more than 2 sentences, but I will take it. I will absolutely take it. Now, everyone describe Anvilogic as if you're talking to your 5-year-old. I'm kidding. We're not going to do that. But I put up an architecture diagram because it's hard to conceptualize this decoupled concept, right? This decoupled detection from storage and compute and analytics without really seeing a picture. So I'm just going to keep it there. But so as we shift from the SIEM, right, so from chasing the next SIEM to designing this flexible modular model that's more cost effective, right, to scale, that gives you a better understanding of where you are, of your coverage, right? Roland, you talked about having a good understanding of your MITRE coverage and a good a good view on what you should prioritize next. Of course, not everyone has, right, this kind of mindset, right? And there's like a maturity dynamic when it comes to going forward with something like this. So Mac, would you agree? Like Roland is one of our more forward-thinking CISOs, right, on the spectrum of the CISO world. But you're working with CISOs all the time who are still stuck in the rip and replace loop. They have to almost have a kind of shift in mindset, right? And an architecture mindset that helps them really break out of that cycle. What do you think is kind of the right mindset that they should be having to be able to try something like this?
Yeah, I think it certainly helps that customers and folks like Roland have taken that step forward, right? And have taken the solutions, right? Prove that they work out, prove that all the things that, people have been saying are valid. I think that gives some trust to the security industry, to other CISOs, that this actually will work, that it will scale. And it is another option from the traditional mindset, right? I think what I'm seeing, and I don't know if this is the right thing to say, but I really do feel like if you're a large enterprise and you're not starting to think this way, you're falling behind, right? You're falling behind because you are going to just continue to run into the same problems that you've run into. And if every 2 to 3 years you have a SIEM replacement project, you're not making progress, right? Like there's a lot of frustration, I think, that's built up internally, where if every couple of years you're just spending 8 to 12 months on a new project to just transfer stuff over, at some point in time you're losing, right, your ability to become better at security operations, right? Because you're just allocating all that time to something else. So I think it's definitely something, and I really appreciate Roland for taking kind of this leap and being vocal about it, because I think strongly that it's a superior solution for the future, for the workloads, like I was saying, that we want to build. And sometimes it just takes organizations to kind of really take that step so that other people can see that that validates, right, that those things are working. So I think it's really important.
Yeah. Is there kind of muscle or like either technical or cultural that you kind of need before something like this becomes possible? Uh, this is just for the panel.
I mean, I would say you need to think about it in different steps. So it's not coming overnight. That's definitely. You will have a SIEM in place today, like we have and we have still have. Yeah. So practically, our first step was to initially connect directly into the SIEM. It helped us analyze the data sets. It helped us understand what we really need. Helped us get some KPIs or reports about the health of our detections and how it can be better. And then we started building at scale detections. And then you need to go back to the source, and you need to have a mechanism, and that's even outside Anvilogic and Databricks here, to build pipelines to send the right data sets to the lake and decouple then from the SIEM, that intelligence layer, and put it on top of the lake. So there are some steps that you need to go through. And it's not easy. I think it took us probably way too much than I thought of. It's probably around 2 years. I
Sure.
don't
Oh
know
yeah.
if it's long or if it's it's short.
Yeah. We will definitely cover the journey there. I heard a lot of different parts of the detection engineering life cycle. I assume there was many different forms of AI at play here, but I think it's so important to get very specific about the type of AI that we're using, right? Whether it's ML or deep learning or even agentic AI, and exactly where in the detection engineering process. So Mac or Alan or Roland, like what areas did it optimize the most critical areas within the detection engineering process, the Anvilogic solution?
I can start. I think for us it was trying to focus on the tasks that are most time consuming and maybe frustrating for practitioners in the workflow, right? And then also focusing on using AI where it's going to help, right? The barrier to entry to maybe using a new technology like Databricks, right? So an easy example of this is searching, right? If I'm familiar with SPL, Splunk language, how do I get better at SQL, right? And our search agent Copilot makes that incredibly easy to do. How do I take an SPL query, translate that to SQL? How do I take natural language? I want to find this and translate that to SQL. So you're eliminating, right? I think where AI can really help in this process is you're eliminating all of those barriers to entry, all the things that people get nervous about when they want to switch to another platform that have historically been problematic, start to become less and less and less problematic, right? And then there's other areas, of course, like tuning as an example, right? It's just like as your alerts are triggering all these high volume detections and all these high volume false positives, right? How do you make sure there's a feedback loop? And AI is pretty good at taking that feedback loop, applying that reasoning to kind of tune your detections as well. So I think though the removing that barrier to entry is probably the most important, at least for this conversation, because it kind of fast tracks people's ability to start using these new technologies.
I think that just answers my next question I had for you, because what I was speaking on the maturity front, right? Because we're working with teams, super incredibly forward, working teams where they're outgrowing their vendors when it comes to AI and what they want to do with their AI workloads. And it's not going to be like a Palo or like a Splunk, right? Databricks is a much better fit for these kind of workloads, especially with the amount of data that you need for them. But we're also working with, so there's those teams, and then we're also working with teams that may not be building bleeding edge machine learning, right? They just want to be able to just plug into powerful detections and just deploy them out in production, right? And build content without this SQL, pain or SPL pain. So I think you just described that really well. As the solution makes it accessible for teams that just want to get started, want to migrate off that old SIM already, or they want to just fully, go and start that over on a much more cost-effective cloud-native data platform. So I appreciate that transparency and applying AI in the detection engineering process. Now, moving on to the journey piece of it. Roland, you said this was like a 2-year process, one that started in like 2023 into 2025, and then however long it goes. Not, what everyone's been waiting for, kind of you to explain this part of the journey. We talked about the problem, we talked about this new approach to a solution. Um, what did, I guess, take us back to 2023. What did it look like then when you were first starting to get it off the ground? What were some of those kind of initial things that you first had to solve for to move forward with something like this?
Well, I mean, we are a complex organization, so I mean, I can't go through all the details. I mean, we are not because it's really complicated to understand, not because it's necessarily private or confidential. I would say that we are the biggest line of business in SAP, first the cloud line of business, enterprise cloud services. We still have a central team that it was operating our SIEM, and it's still doing that. So we are one tenant or one LOB into that big umbrella, right? The biggest one, but we are still one in that umbrella. So for us, the main challenge was that because we are the owner of the environment, so we operate the systems, we know the business, we know the operations, we know everything. We are responsible for tuning our own detections that fit our business itself. So the global team is helping us to actually build detections for the whole company, but they can't help us in building detections for the business itself. And that's where the main challenge is. We need to have better speed, and we need to have better coverage and better deployments and visibility into what our business is doing. So how can we do that? Looking back into the roles and responsibilities in the RACI model, how could we access our Splunk SIEM? That was a bit not coming with the right speed in mind. We are analyzing how much time we lose, you know, um, how many people we need to actually hire, and how good we are in actually doing it. And that was the moment where we said, how can we integrate something into the existing model? Don't change the model per se from, because it's difficult. There are other people, other units, central organizations, etc. They are still delivering services for us, but how can we integrate into the model and gain immediate speed? So that's how we actually started with Anvilogic integrating directly into our Splunk. So we were able immediately to actually tackle and see, okay, what data sets we have, what we need, how good we are, how bad we are, where we can improve. And we gained some real fast results into that process of actually deploying detections at scale. We had much better coverage in a really short period of time. So we fixed a pain point that we had, building detections for the business at scale with the right speed. That was the number one. Then we moved to number two, where is, okay, it's still not efficient. Cost-wise, we are sending too much data. We pay too much from the ingestion perspective. Is it rightly designed from the architecture perspective? Yes, no. How can we give back to customers part of the data? And we actually concluded we need a different architecture. When we think about a different architecture, we had to go back to the source and redesign all the pipelines from the end source itself, all the systems, all the data sources. So we started to redesign that. We still got the connections directly to Splunk, but we are all the time prepared to ship into different destinations. We created smaller data sets in all the subscriptions of our customers because we wanted to give them back with real-time APIs, the logs to their own SIEM. So we had different sort of interconnections. And actually, in the same time, right now we were started to build the big data lake that actually will be the foundation for the model that we implemented right now. So we redesigned all the data sets, the pipelines, and everything. Right now, we are moving all of them to a big data lake, which is Databricks. We are close to finalize that process. And then we translate all the detections we build to in Splunk. We move them back to Databricks, and actually we recreate the model with the new architecture and the new efficiencies that we gain. And this is where the partnership comes in, with the help of you guys, so both Databricks and Anvilogic, and that integration that is actually possible today, that allows us to really move efficiently and actually do not lose the work that we have done to make it happen in Splunk, to literally easily translate that to Databricks and give us back the control, the speed, the cost efficiencies, and everything that we need to be able to run the detection at scale on our end.
So it sounds like it gave you the possibility to measure how it all was doing, even in that initial, Splunk deployment, Anvilogic and Splunk deployment. And because of those metrics, that was easy to show the value. It was easy to show how well your program was doing. And in order for you to just keep taking control wherever you wanted to keep taking your program. So was that the stakeholder criteria buy-in that you use to communicate something like this to your stakeholders?
Yeah, I mean, there are multiple areas there, and I will one was definitely the fact that we can be better. So we were able to probably reduce the time we spent in building detections by 5 to 6x. So that's probably one of the KPIs in there. And then we are able to reduce some data sets, so the amount of data that we are sending. And then we create a different sort of let's say retention periods for several data sets. And then we also used our customers in this journey, because we, in the end, like you, do things for us as a customer. We also do a lot of things for our customers. So one of their challenge and requests was, how can we give them back things, the logs, the dashboards, data sets, etc. So having all the data in one place and being able to serve this one use case, but then next year will be another use case, in 2 years another use case, and so on, and having everything at hand to serve irrespective of how the business will move on in the next 1, 2, 3 years. That was the main key driver for our management to support this decision to move further. And to be honest, in the end, it was, I would say, I will not say it was a cost saving, but it goes even back to that. Yeah, I mean, for us, how we track costs is a bit more complicated, with, again, global teams, cross charges, and etc. But if I would be an independent line of business or independent company, and I will try to look back in the past and look at the costs, I would say, if you take everything into consideration, meaning technology, I mean licensing, ingestion costs, pipeline creation, storage, people, and processes, I think it can come back to definitely not an investment, but actually a cost reduction with efficiencies on top.
Oh, definitely cost reduction. Mac, anything you would add for sort of our other customers that are following this journey? I think that's one of the biggest reasons that they choose to try something like this, is because of the cost savings that they're able to achieve with best of breed tooling versus the other centralized model.
Yeah, there's definitely significant cost savings that we've seen with our other customers when it comes down to just like comparing, right, the size of data that people are bringing in. Like Roland was saying earlier, every couple of years you're triple or quadrupling the size of data that you need to store in these, traditional SIMs. That becomes incredibly costly, right? And maintaining those systems becomes very costly. So what we've seen, at least on average, just to simplify it a bit, just the movement of similar data sets and workloads from the detection side, from, let's say, a traditional SIM like Splunk into something like Databricks, just on the cost savings of that same data processing through is significant. And not just the cost savings, but you're getting, in my opinion, a lot more improved analytics on top of that data. So your scalability, the use cases that you can actually go and build, right? The types of dashboarding and systems that you can actually create on top of that data is significantly more powerful and reusable across different business units that probably want access to similar types of data as well. So it definitely has a huge cost savings aspect, but I think the other analytic aspects are also really important to understand.
Oh, absolutely. Alan, anything you'd add from a data architecture point of view, like running, you've seen firsthand the performance of those detection jobs, the content that we deploy on your Databricks tenants, like anything you'd add from like the performance, the architecture piece.
Sure. So, I mean, let's go 1 second back to the cost savings. It's not just about cost savings at the end of the day, right? Like if costs are too high, and this is what we see with other customers as well, is it actually becomes prohibitively expensive. So that logging is reduced to an amount where you actually get a blind spot, right? You're not keeping the data for long enough. You're not ingesting everything that you would need. You tell other lines of businesses maybe to like reduce their logging because of that, right? This is actually a security threat, right? If you get to that point. Now, at the same time, right, while you reduce the costs and you actually have a quite safe journey getting there, right? So you can actually adopt, for instance, Anvilogic on top of your existing SIM, see how well it's working, try out for a subset of data feeds also on Databricks and see how does it compare, and then actually make the final decision and the switch, right? So it's actually a low risk way of moving. And that's, I think, one reason why many security teams are actually hesitant to do that, right? Because security is not just some random function. It's like very important. It's very core, and you don't want to mess it up, right? So you're looking for like low risk ways of doing that, obviously. Yeah, and obviously after you kind of do the migration, you not only have lower costs and more data at your disposal that kind of reduces this blind spot, but you can use it for much more things, right? You're not tied to one single vendor that provides you with some features or does not provide you with some features. Yeah, you can adopt multiple smaller vendors on top of a solution like Databricks. You can have your own teams that do custom things for you when you need that, right? You're not locked in by that. So it gives you this flexibility. And also what Roland did, right? Sharing the data with others, right? This becomes more and more a big topic obviously in today's world and in the cloud.
Best of breed tooling, y'all. I think that it gives you the visibility, the governance. It improves, right, in complex distributed tech stacks like this, and it takes risk off the table immediately because you can show coverage in a way that resonates to your leadership just off of, on top of Splunk or on top of a Sentinel, for example, and then until you move over to Databricks on at your own pace. So absolutely love.
Yeah, Alex, real quick on that. I think Alan said that really well. I think I just want to make sure we reiterate that is that the risk of trying something like Databricks can be low, right? You can take one feed, two feeds, large feeds that maybe you don't have access to today, right? Because you can't, for whatever reason, get them into your existing tooling. Put those into something like Databricks and begin to test the waters on what detection engineering looks like there. So that way you're not going all in, right, from day one. You're taking a more pragmatic approach to adopting it. And over time, right, what we've seen our customers do is they start with one feed, then they go to two, then they go to three, then a year later they're maybe 50-50, and then and they're doing it at their own pace, right? So it's non-disruptive. It's not a rip and replace. It's a ecosystem now where you can do both your existing and something new. And I think that approach is really powerful because it does alleviate a lot of that risk of the rip and replace and all that stress that comes with that.
Yeah. And Roland and Chaz on our team, so many of our leaders here and in UMAC even were such data-driven leaders. When you guys, anything you decide, anything you go off of has to be proven and resonated with numbers and with data, right? And I think that I meant to show these quotes earlier in our presentation before we started talking about coverage and outcomes, but we're still running into people or other leaders that it's very difficult to see where progress is, and therefore it's difficult to chase the right kind of things if we don't know where we are in the first place, right? And I think that with just that control and that ability to measure the coverage of where you are and being able to report it in a way that matters and resonates and sets that priority is so important. And I think played a huge factor in this deployment. So Stephen Thompson hit it really well, where if we do even know where we are at Anvilogic, you can easily just log in and see your current coverage and see where those gaps are, and have not be limited by the data that you need to fill those gaps, right? Because Databricks is very cost effective. So I think that concludes our segment 3, where of course we have to talk about the lessons learned and our vision forward. If you reflect on your journey, what was like the biggest takeaway, the biggest gotcha that you've come across? Is there anything that surprised you? It can be good or bad. We can be open about it. And that's for the panel.
I think it's for us whatever, I will not call it a surprise, but you don't know what to expect at the beginning. So the surprise was in how unstructured the data that we had. And when I say unstructured, it's not that we look into, video files and etc., but like how unstructured the data sets that we had initially. We were not able to have decisions that were looking into a specific area. So we are saying like, give me all the data. I'll take all the log from here. Give me the security audit log from this system and give me the whatever kind of log. We are just taking everything. And then we were like, oh, we don't have, the licenses there. Exactly what I think Ellen or Mac, that you both said that we're started having blind spots. So I think for us, the surprise or the good thing was that we started this and we realized we need to actually do some changes in the way we are running the pipelines. And this is a bit irrespective of the tool sets here. It's like, how can we be more efficient there? We got some reports from Anvilogic. We knew exactly how, that we need that and that. But how can we literally select from different logs pieces that we need to actually avoid sending, a bunch of noise to the systems or even to the lake. And that's not an easy thing to do when you have multiple data sets and when you practically also operate. We don't, because every customer is different in our environment. We can't say we have a lot of golden standards. Yeah. So there are a lot of changes that we see left and right. We have 7,500 plus customers today. I will not say all of them are different, but the systems and the structure of the systems and the way they build their ERPs is different. So looking at the data sets in a centralized way and trying to create even, ways of collecting that and having the right visibility, it's not an easy task. So initially we say, yeah, we have a lot of data, but when you actually start looking into it and trying to build the granularity, and then you have whatever, some sort of vulnerabilities or alerts or things that, and you need to customize and develop new types of detections and all that. I think that's where the complexity comes in. So probably that was I will not say it a surprise, but a thing that we encountered on the path. I don't think we will do things differently. Probably we'll do it in the same way. Should I touch base? What's the future looking like? Or so if I think for the future, I mean, we are in the process of finalizing that. But I think what Alan just said is you can use these data sets and the data lake and the data itself for a lot of other things. And for me as a CISO, what I'm challenging my team with is about the real risk management. And when I say real risk management, for me that doesn't mean a tool that look at some data and gives you some financial numbers and how you can actually, and could be the impact of a specific attack to your environment, but like really taking feeds and data sets from vulnerabilities, posture management, from endpoint protection, from the SIEM itself, or from different sort of alerts, from your SOAR tool, from the flows, from the network related data, getting all that, and then the state of the applications that we are running, putting them all together and actually building real-time contextualized risk management that could tell in any moment of time what could be your risk score. And that should change literally real time, hour by hour, day after day, because the state of the system could change. So that's what the future would look like for me, being able to wake up in the morning and say, I want to have a risk score for my whole cloud. I want to have a risk score for one subscription. I want to have a risk score for one system based on the same algorithm, based on the same data sets and the way we are looking at it. So that's how the future will look like.
I love that. I think you took us right into the vision forward.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to just cover all of them so that I give back to Ellen and Mac.
No, let's do that. These last 5 minutes, of course, we cannot talk about AI on this webinar. It's on everyone's radar, and you've operationalized it in the area where I keep talking about that it matters the most, right? It shows the most impact in upstream, right? Before it even hits the SOAR, right? Inside of the detection engineering process. What impacts have you felt the most from that shift, right? I think I even know the answer. Is it speed? Is it the quality or how your teams focus their time?
I think speed comes with how my team focused on, on time.
Mhm.
There is still customizations to be made, yeah. So don't expect that you push a button and everything, goes on, and you don't need you can operate it yourself as a CISO, and then everything is good and fine. So that's not going to happen. So there's still a lot of fine tuning. There is still a lot of work with the teams, but it's a different type of work. So it's not into the building itself. They have a lot of help from the tool, and actually I think we can say that we spend much less time into the build phase, and then we can create much more than we were able to do it 2 years ago. So it's all of those, to be honest, for me represent speed.
Awesome. And there was, and Mag, this is more towards you, but you talked a little bit about earlier all the different multiple, forms of how we can use AI in the tuning process or in the build process. But now that we're heading into this next phase, right, in 2025 and beyond, agentic workflows, right, that can actually even fully orchestrate across that detection engineering process. What does that next wave look like for Roland's deployment? Right? How much more velocity can that even unlock further?
Yeah, I think the kind of standard we're moving towards, or that light at the end of the tunnel, is kind of building these workflows and having them be able to communicate between each other, right? So you start with data onboarding, right? You're probably constantly onboarding new data as it becomes available for the right reasons into something like Databricks, right? How do you make it easy to create that ETL process, right? How do you use AI for the parsing and normalization of that data, right? How do you save time in some of that work? And then once that data is landed, right, to Roland's point, the stuff that we've been doing with the team already is how do I then make it easier to understand where I have gaps, to deploy new detections, convert, right, natural language to PySpark, right? All the things that may be time consuming in the detection engineering space, right? And then you move towards maintenance, right? You got thousands of rules running. How do you maintain them? Tuning, health monitoring, right? Hunting on top of that. And then you go downstream in the triage and response, right? How do you better analyze it, classify the things that comes from the systems, feed that into your triage team with more context? So all that, I think, plays into a role of just this consistent workflow between onboarding data, using that data, responding to those alerts that come from that data, and just constantly trying to improve it. And then also streamline that from end to end. And that's where I see the vision is more of making sure that AI can help do that in an assisted way, but maybe in the future start to take specific inputs across that process and streamline that end to end with minimal intervention.
It might not be as in the future as we think. It might be in the next few months here.
I think so. Like when it comes to like maybe taking a threat intel report, right, and feeding that into our product to help create a detection pack for that and deploying it against data feeds that you already have. That's short term, right? I think the end-to-end workflow will take time to ensure accuracy, but I think you're right. I think a lot of this is a little bit closer than maybe than it appears to be right now.
And Alan, what is the next evolution from the detection or infrastructure side, right? As we know, data volume and complexity continues to surge year on year. I've seen different metrics for it. It's like 30%, I've seen 40%, I've seen like 50% year on year. What's next for Databricks on this front?
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think Meg also covered it very well when it comes to the detection engineering. Obviously, on the security response side, there will be a lot of impact. So AI will have a great impact, right? So I think not only will make things easier and faster, but also like reduce the barrier for entry. So, for instance, what we have in Databricks is like a engine that you can use to ask your questions in natural language, and it will respond to your natural language, right? And it's obviously also not magic, so you also need to know essentially what to ask for, right? But if you take someone who has a lot of experience in the cybersecurity space, but isn't familiar, for instance, with SQL, then this makes this transition much, much simpler, right? So it really democratizes the access to that data to, for instance, do threat hunting, right? And that's one major thing really that Databricks is kind of working on. And it's also available today, right? So it's just a matter of proving itself as well. Yeah, and the other side is also data discovery. I think it's a little bit underappreciated, but if you think about having a lakehouse with like hundreds of different data sources with logs that even change over time, it's not so easy to actually find the right data source out of the box, right? And in order to do that, you need a lot of context, right? And classical searches are very like text-based, but not really context-based. They don't really capture the semantic meaning of the data and of the metadata. And then I can really help create that metadata to make the search better and optimize the search to not only be purely like text-based, but really context-based.
I love it. I love to see it. It sounds like hope is making a comeback, right? It doesn't have to be this way. With all of the problems and the inhibitors that we've discussed, this constant cycle, this almost like a toxic X cycle of thinking that this next time it's going to be different when it comes to the traditional SIEM monolithic model. So I absolutely loved our conversation. I think this has been incredibly valuable for any CISO that is kind of doubling down and exploring whether something like this is worth pursuing. So again, not just about the technology, but also about mindset, right? You have to kind of be in this mindset of iteration and change and how the business is constantly dynamically changing, and you have to really adapt with it. Otherwise, it moves you. So I think we've been very, very clear in what we've heard today, right? The future of detection shouldn't be centralized, right? It's composable, it's best of breed, it's decoupled, right? And it's AI native and aligned to how your business runs. So Roland, Mac, Alan, thank you so much for your clarity and your candor, and just for being some of the most forward-thinking leaders in the space right now. And everyone tuning in, you can find more information about our Databricks integration by scanning this QR code or visiting Anvilogic for Databricks. And also, there is still time if you want to tune in, maybe even virtually, for the Data and AI Summit next week. So excited to continue the momentum funnel into this Databricks and Anvilogic partnership. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.